I can't imagine being a business owner and not being its colorist, because I have so much face time with my clients that I really, we're in the business of sales and we're selling to clients, and what we're selling isn't just color, it's the whole experience and the relationship and how you make the clients feel when they walk in the door and then walk out the door.
On this episode of the Colorist Podcast, I have a conversation with Ayumi Ashley. She is the founder of Mission Film and Design in San Francisco, California. It's a boutique color, sound, and visual effects facility focusing mainly on commercials, music videos, and short films. She has completed work for North Face, Sky Vodka, and Ben & Jerry's. Additionally, Silicon Valley clients like Adobe, Pinterest, and Square have also finished their work with her. Ayumi started working as a freelance colorist while still attending college. Apple Color and the reduced price of DaVinci Resolve helped her hone her skills and enter the ranks of working colorists quickly. The combination of affordable grading platforms, higher demand for colorists, and minimal competition in her area helped her start and run her own finishing company. In this interview, we talk about why the 5D Mark II had such a profound impact in her market, working in San Francisco and why there aren't many colorists there, and running a facility and prioritizing the budget accordingly. And now, here's Ayumi Ashley. Hey Ayumi, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Briefly, just give us a rundown of how you got started as a colorist.
I was exposed to it when I was in school studying film editing. And I don't think I knew that it was a thing until I learned about it kind of coincidentally. But it was immediately clear that's what I wanted to do. Because I was already really into like Photoshop and kind of post-processing of images, had an artistic upbringing. So I was drawn to it immediately.
What kind of art were you exposed to when you were younger?
Well, my parents sent me to a Waldorf school. So kind of all of it. A lot of painting, which, in hindsight was very helpful to have a foundation. And then I really was excited about photography growing up, learned about Photoshop, became really interested in images. So film was kind of a natural progression. And I studied editing, but I abandoned it pretty quickly.
Were there any artists? Because a lot of colorists don't have that fine art background. Is there any artists that you were really into?
Not really, because the way the school is taught, it's very kind of it's like a total hippie school. That was very much about self-expression. So we didn't really study art. We just kind of did it, The Waldorf education, for example, they make you paint with watercolors on wet paper. So you can't draw lines, it's just about shape and color and composition. So definitely a different kind of upbringing. A
lot of colorists have never picked up paint, or they are not skilled in the same traditional ways. So that's interesting that how that informed how you work too.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see a direct correlation, but I'm sure that it built some structures in my brain that came into play later on in ways that I don't even notice.
So you were going to film school. This was around when?
So I went to film school. I graduated in 2011, but I started my freelance career well before I graduated. So toward the end of my schooling, I had to do nights and online classes. And I think I thought that I might not graduate especially because I was getting work. So I made sure to get all my technical and like creative or all the classes that I thought would help me done. I got those done early in the program. By the time I started freelancing in 2009, early 2010, I was just doing the liberal arts stuff at night online just to get the piece of paper, really.
As you were coming up during that time, that was right around the time that the 5D Mark II had come out. And there was a lot of people you're in San Francisco, and a lot of people were shooting with that.
So while I was in college, I got an internship with Eric Escobar, who is a director and colorist. And at the time, he was actually trying to move away from color and focus on directing. He saw that I was capable, and I was helping him with color jobs. And then he just started directing his color clients to me directly. A lot of things came together. So as someone who doesn't start work at a facility, if someone wants to start a freelance color career just by taking gigs and working, there's this time period between when you start doing the thing to when you're actually a viable colorist who should be doing the job for colorist rates. Those years in between, I don't know if you want to call it like 10,000 hours, whatever that is. There's this time when not only are you getting better, but your body of work is growing, your client base is growing. Kind of like the period where you're faking it until you make it. It's kind of inevitable unless you start at a facility where someone knows your level and they're giving you a chance. But if you're just working and taking money for your work, there's a lot you can do to make sure that you're not being irresponsible with that position, by like having investing in your color suite and making sure you have calibrated environment and monitors. But your skill level, the only thing that'll get you there is time and practice. So for me, I think it worked out when I was going through that time period. The industry as a whole was sort of suffering. So more people were willing to give me a chance because my rates were attracted to them.
Yeah, there weren't very many people out there that were doing it either.
Yeah, exactly. Which, especially in San Francisco, it's not like New York or LA, but here, because there aren't very many colorists, I was getting, I got busy pretty quickly. When I first started freelancing, after I quit my day job, I actually was taking gigs as an on-set DIT just to fill the days between the color gigs I was getting. But eventually, I never reached out for color work, and eventually I got pretty busy pretty quickly just by word of mouth. Right around the same time that all this is happening, San Francisco was being hit by the recession. And I speak about San Francisco as a whole, but there's kind of a few different tiers of production happening here. At the highest level, there's the agencies who didn't know I existed then. And then there's kind of direct-to-client stuff. And then a huge portion in the middle is these production companies here that typically have tech clients because of our climate. Those were the clients that were being hit hardest by the recession, with budgets shrinking. A lot of people joke that the 5D Mark II is what got San Francisco through the recession. So at the time, it was still shooting, like 2997, and it looked horrible. But people were able to put cinema lenses on them. And, the joke is that with the shallow depth of field, you don't need production design. And it looks expensive. You can get a cinematic image out of it if you know what you're doing. So it was really popular at the time. But the thing about that camera is I think a lot of my smaller clients hired their first colors because of that camera. It can just, the picture can be totally all over the place. A lot of them had, 2 cameras for interview setup and they just wouldn't match, or the image would just be totally red or something. So that's when a lot of these clients who maybe previously didn't consider a colorist something to write into their budget started asking around, hey, do you know a colorist? I really need one. And then that's when people were able to be like, oh, there's this person, Ayumi. She's new, but give her a try. And I couldn't charge that much then because of my experience level, so it all kind of worked out.
When people think of San Francisco, they don't think of it as a small town. They think of it as a pretty big city. Why do you think that there aren't a lot of colorists in that city?
I'm not totally sure. I mean, now that I'm trying to find new colorists coming into the scene, just because we need more hands at my shop, I'm realizing that there aren't that many young people who, we're always, as business owners, always looking for our younger selves. And I can't seem to find that person. But, there's definitely a great colorist here. A lot of the big jobs go to LA, New York. We did have a branch of Photochem here called Spy. But they actually closed their doors in June because the rent situation here is so insane.
One of the things that I've learned from talking to you, too, and talking to other colorists is color grading and running a business are 2 different skills. So how did you learn how to run your business?
Well, I've always been a business. Because I never worked at a facility, I kind of just had to figure it out. So, of course, I had advisors when I was starting, which is really great for learning about, like holds and challenges and invoicing and tax deductions and all the things that they really should teach in film school, but they don't. But yeah, fast forwarding to now, I own a finishing facility here. We've expanded our services to include sound mix and sound design. And as someone running a bigger operation than, just little Ayumi in the color suite, I can't imagine being a business owner and not being its colorist, because I have so much face time with my clients that I really, we're in the business of sales and we're selling to clients, and what we're selling isn't just color. It's the whole experience and the relationship and how you make the clients feel when they walk in the door and then walk out the door. And you're in complete control of, that whole experience start to finish as a colorist because you're in the room with them. And I didn't really appreciate that fully until we brought on Chris Martin, a colorist here, because that was really the first experience I had where I, greeted my client that I've really like hard earned over the years, put them in the room with Chris and closed the door. And that was it. And I had no idea what kind of narrative was being told about our company and what kind of experience the client was having. I didn't have any visual feedback on how they were interacting with our facility. So that's when I really realized, it was very eye-opening. I realized what a privileged position it is as a business owner to also be the artist.
And it sounds like you're also building a brand. When they say we're hiring Ayumi's place, it's like the brand that you're selling to. Like if you go into a store and you go and they have the generic can of Coke and they have a real can of Coke, most people go for the can of Coke because it's what they're used to and what they're comfortable with, and they know what they're getting. Even though the two things may be very similar, there's some really important thing about having a really good brand, wouldn't you say?
Well, that was also a difficult thing for me to transfer my brand to a bigger entity. When I first started freelancing, I met Matt Notaro, who's my business partner now. He was an editor at the time, and he was going freelance, and I was building my freelance business. So it worked out for us to get a studio space together. And we're just two independent contractors just working in the same space. But we eventually found that it was a good mutual referral system. So we were working on a lot of the same projects together, which is why we started Mission Film and Design. We rebranded, got a big space, brought on more people, expanded our services, dropped editorial because we're starting to work with a lot of editorial facilities. So we didn't want to have, conflict of interest for them to hire us. So in that process, with getting our branding in order and everything, until then, I was always just Ayumi Ashley and, my personal Twitter feed and my personal Instagram and being credited in whatever I'm in as me. Transferring that was challenging because it's letting go of some control for me. I got some advice that there's no growth in Ayumi Ashley, but there is growth in MFD, which now, I really feel because it's really special actually, because Chris Martin, our other colorist, and myself, we're kind of considered the two names in color in San Francisco. And I think he and I mutually were the only colorists that our clients see us as being interchangeable. If it was anyone else, it would be an upgrade or a downgrade from at least our existing client base's eyes. Not to say that there aren't other great colorists in San Francisco, but, our paths don't cross. And so that's been really cool because now we're starting to get inquiries where either a client doesn't really care who they end up with, or if one of us is unavailable and we suggest the other, they don't feel like that's a detriment to their project. They're just as pleased. And that makes it much easier to schedule. It makes it easier for me to have a life and take vacations and Chris too. And it's been really cool.
Yeah. It's like the same thing. If somebody goes to a big facility, they figure, well, everybody that gets hired at this facility is top notch. And so whoever I'm getting should be as awesome as the next. When you were building your business and you were coming up and you had these clients and you earned their trust, they had to be in your room and you have to perform. When you're a colorist, you have to be able to, if they ask you to do something, you have to do it right there on the spot. What's your opinion of that, about how you have to be interactive with your clients?
I really love that part of the job. It's one of the things that makes me think that, because I'm constantly kind of grateful that color as a job ended up suiting me and my personality in ways that I couldn't have anticipated. And one of them is just hanging out with your clients all day and making them feel good about their project. Whatever you're doing, you're constantly selling what you're doing to your client. So even if it's something that they suggested, you want to sell it back to them as, hey, your idea is really great and it's really working. And we can see that here. I think it's really interesting. And I think it's a special kind of dance, if you will.
We had talked before too, and you were saying there's this interesting technique that you have that you really pay very close attention to what your clients do, where they sit, to like the nth degree. You really are honed in on even the most simple things as what they do when they come into your bay.
As a facility owner / colorist, I really get into the client experience almost to the level of a hotel. Anything from when the client walks in the door, is it intuitive which way they should turn? And then I also have my color suite set up so the artist sits in the back of the room facing the same direction as the client, and the client couch is in front of the colorist desk. And there's a little gap in the colorist monitors. So if someone wants to make eye contact, they can. There's also a producer desk because you put a desk somewhere in the room and the producer is just like a magnet to it. The experience that I want the client to have is to feel like all their needs were met without them having to ask and without them feeling like someone was like pandering to them. So if they feel like they want something, I want it to already be there. That kind of client service is something that I enjoy. And it's really cool because I ask our studio assistants to do certain things, to put things certain places at certain timings. And I get to be in the back of the room kind of watching how our clients interact with the space and what's working and what's not working. Just to give you an example, like each suite, we have our bias light behind the monitor and, we have kind of lights, kind of daylight balance, low lights placed strategically around the room. So there's no real dark pockets, but also coming from a colorist perspective, I make sure that none of these lights are in the artist's peripheral vision. It's not reflecting against any monitors. We have a big container with like snacks, anything from like Reese's and Snickers to like Kind bars. It's kind of have a little like, cough drops and gum. And that's kind of placed strategically around the room. There's one on each corner of the room. And even little things like we have these like glass bottles of chilled water that we set out and put out water glasses and I always ask our studio assistants to put out one more glass than the number of people we're expecting. And all these things, that I just super paid attention to over the years that work. And also I get to be in the room when the clients talk to each other about how everything's right there when they need it and how great the facility is and how good of an experience they're having. So that's really rewarding.
It's interesting too, because when you run your business, you're paying for everything. When you work in a facility, you kind of say, well, why don't I have the big panels? But then when it's you that has to pay for it, it's a completely different story. That kind of leads me to my next question about hardware. What do you think of using the Resolve full panels versus, say, a tangent element?
We have one suite with the full panels and one suite with the elements. I love the big panels and I use them whenever possible. So Chris Martin, who came over to join us, he brought the panels with him. So we didn't have to deal with that price tag. But until he did, that was a question that I was grappling with is, do we upgrade or do we stick with the elements? I think I felt that I did want them eventually, but the way I had to do kind of the cost value analysis was that, okay, what am I really gaining from the big panels except some sort of status? And the only thing that would make it worth it is if I was gaining speed, at least gaining speed in quantity that felt proportional to the cost. And I am really fast on the elements. And in a lot of ways, I personally find like button combinations easier to put into muscle memory than button locations. Because, on like the element, you hit like B and then window and then circle or whatever,
I'm right there with you. I'm on freelance gigs. Most of the time they have an element panel and there's just a series of 3 buttons that you're pressing all the time and your muscle memory gets used to that very quickly.
Totally. I really like that except for all the clacking, but I'm really fast on the elements. So I had to, look at our bottom line and say, can we buy this $30,000 piece of equipment that isn't going to make us any more money and maybe won't really improve anything very much at all, except for, they feel amazing. The wheels and the balls, they feel expensive, which is a nice thing, but really,
having the big panels from a client perspective, did they walk in and go, well, this is a serious room, there's big panels, or could they just care less?
Honestly, clients take Instagram photos of my elements. They're very impressed. They're like, whoa, what do these balls and wheels do? Sometimes there's like the editor who like dabbles in Resolve who comes along with the clients who are really impressed by the panels, but they're not the ones hiring you. Producers, and this is totally skipping topics, but this is how I feel about before and after wipes and reels as well, is it's like, who are you really trying to impress? And really it's, you want to impress producers and you want the producers to be able to impress their clients. And those people don't care what panel you're using, at least from my experience.
So from your perspective, actually setting up the room and making it comfortable for clients, that money is way better spent than spending it on big panels in the rooms.
I don't know if we're considered like a boutique post facility or what, but we don't have investors. It's really everything counts, so we try to spend the money where it shows, and that's, staff and that's our monitors. especially we're a new business. We're almost 2 years old. It's been, we had to buy an LTO system, and I'm really proud of the way that we founded our company. Just, we self-funded, and we're really just like working for everything that we bought for the company. And it's great that we did it that way from a pride perspective. But if we were a huge shop with like a starting budget, then that's probably, we always have to be like, okay, what are we buying next month? Okay, we really need an LTO backup system. Okay, we really need a SAN. Okay, we need to hire this full-time person. So from a strategy perspective of just building a business from the ground up, that kind of thing definitely takes a back seat.
The way that your business is set up too, it's really focused around getting people in San Francisco to come to your shop. But do you ever have people that want to do remote, or they do reviews via, I think you said you were using Frame.io?
Yeah, we're big fans of Frame.io. And I would say maybe 30% of my sessions are unsupervised. Even if, sometimes it's because the creatives are remote, and we have clients in other cities. But a lot of times it's, people not everyone wants to go to a color session, I guess. We used to just do, stills and Dropbox videos and stuff, but we've been really into Frame.io. Of course, there's always problems of browser shifting colors, and we found that the Frame.io iOS app has had good color fidelity for the most part, or as much as we can hope for. But we don't really do any remote work like pairing Resolve systems together or streaming to client monitors or anything like that. And there doesn't really seem to be a need for that on our client end.
Because you make it so inviting for your clients to come in that they have to come in.
You know what, though? The whole client services song and dance, even with, our pastry spread in the morning and like our fancy espresso run, I'm glad that we're providing a good experience for everyone, but really who it's for is for agency creatives. That's the business that we were really excited to win. Because, other production companies, at this point, we have a very personal relationship with them too. So they don't need us to give them a cheese spread, but that's just a nice thing. It's just an added bonus. But for agency creatives, agency producers don't want to send their creatives anywhere, or just anywhere. In my old studio space, I did have a couple of big agency jobs, and it was a huge deal. It was a huge, almost like an honor, because they're really there to work with me specifically and really took a chance on sending their creatives in, frankly, kind of like a weird, room inside of a big building. But now I think we have a facility that is good enough for agency creatives to feel kind of pampered, because that is what they want. And I think a lot of agencies that previously sent their creatives to color in New York and LA are starting to finish here. And there's conversation that happens a lot where they're excited to be able to finish here because they felt like, especially with Photochem SPY being gone, that was no longer an option for them. So there's this air of kind of excitement for discovering us and having a place where they can trust that their precious creatives are feeling really taken care of.
So you mostly do commercial work. Is there any work that you haven't done yet that you really are interested in pursuing?
So we do mostly commercial work, and it's all just kind of like, 4-hour jobs, 8-hour jobs, but our calendar gets full, so it's tons of little jobs. I love doing music videos, probably like all colorists. And we have those come in regularly. We have feature films coming in regularly, and we're working on our relationship with the Film Society here to get more indie film productions to spend their post-production grants with us instead of just blowing it at Skywalker Sound. There's some exciting stuff coming down the pipeline in terms of relationships, but for me personally, I just really love commercials, and we just don't get enough of like the cars, beverage. We get no fashion. I'd love to do like a perfume ad, more car stuff, more like liquor ads, beer. I've never done a beer commercial. So there's just kind of some dry areas in terms of finishing here in commercial accounts.
I'm assuming being up there, you have some .com clients as well.
We definitely work with all the tech giants, and a lot of them have internal video teams. And that is actually, so just to talk about the climate here, we do tons of work with like Google and Facebook and Pinterest and, PayPal and all those companies. And a lot of them have, and Uber and Square, and many of those have internal video teams. which I think, is kind of crazy because it's kind of these like production companies that have a single client, basically. Of course, none of them have a colorist on staff. So that is a huge part of our client base, is kind of direct to client, working with internal video teams. And a lot of times those clients will still send their, broadcast spots or their bigger campaigns to agencies, but there's just tons of content being created here. And we're really feeling a boom. Like the budgets are just, getting bigger and bigger. And there's companies, there's so much content being created. Most of it's web.
So do you feel like there's a lot of those clients that have never been to a color session and you kind of have to be an educator as well?
Yeah, I guess so. I definitely get, my share of people who have never been in a color session before. And a lot of them come in very humble. They're like nervous. It's like, oh, like, let me know if they're saying, let me know if I'm doing something wrong, But I've never been one to educate clients. Like, at least, that's never my intention. For me, some clients really do want to learn and then I'll help them out. But usually everyone has their own vocabulary. And I think it's the colorist's job to learn what that specific person's vocabulary is. So if they're saying brightness, but they mean saturation, I'm not going to be like, hey, that's actually not correct. I'll just remember that this one client likes to speak that way, in the same way that I remember which clients like vignettes and which ones really hate them. And I think it's just kind of part of the client relations job, part of the job of being a colorist.
At a certain point, you get stuck and there's an issue with trying to come up with what look needs to go what way. Where do you get your inspiration from?
If I'm having writer's block or if I need inspiration, the thing is there's just never time in a color session to be needing inspiration. Maybe you feel stuck for a minute, but if I have a 3-hour session, I need to figure it out, So I really like working with still images. That's kind of like my shortcut to feeling inspired. So I have an arsenal of just images I really like and kind of categorized into a bunch of different categories. And, I'll have a conversation with a client, what they might think this could look like, even if it's totally different. And then I'll look it up, maybe like a trailer of a movie or something, take some screenshots, and I bring it into Resolve and I load it up and I look it on scopes, and just kind of contemplate it for a second. And even if it's totally wrong for the image, I like, matching to the still image. Just I think it's kind of a fun thing to do. And that usually kind of gets me out of any sort of like creative block, just by maybe taking me out of my comfort zone or just taking the image somewhere that it totally shouldn't go. But oftentimes I find that that's a great way to kind of shake up your brain when you feel a little stuck. I had this experience creating this music video that was shot in the redwoods around here. And the client kept asking me to make the forest floor really, really red and the ferns really, really green and the saturation just really pushing it so much so that I felt it looked kind of ridiculous. And I had to kind of cross this line that we all hope we don't have to cross where we're like, well, okay, fine, it's your movie, I guess we're going to do it your way. And then, ultimately I think it looked good and the client was happy. So that ended well. But way later, I went out on a hike in the same redwoods right after it rained. And I just don't get out much from the color suite and the daily commute. So I was on this hike and I was looking around and I realized that he was totally right. That the forest floor does really get crazy red and the ferns look really, really green after it rains. So that was a lesson in just the colorist's responsibility to just be in a variety of environments and variety of time of day, time of year, weather, just because it's part of our job to know what things look like and what they feel like in relation to what your eyeballs are seeing.
Yeah, that's a great strategy too. And we don't get out of the rooms enough. And it's important to remember that we need to see real life.
Totally. Yeah, because it's, you're trying to recreate a sunset or something, but if you haven't seen the sunset in a while,
Yeah.
and I find that even if I'm, like up early to move my car or something, it's just being in a time or place that's different from my everyday routine really does get me to pay attention to what colors look like. And I'll definitely stare at the sky and study it. Or just, how shadows fall certain time of day or, there's inspiration out there. And
so you mainly, and from the beginning, you've worked with DaVinci Resolve. And as we said before, you own your facility, and it obviously is one of the most inexpensive ways to go if you use that. But if you had to make a choice for your business, what system would you use if you couldn't use that one?
Well, Resolve was, of course, it's almost the only choice based on the price point and how well integrated into the video community it's become. But just from, just being a colorist interested in software, like I'd love to learn Baselight just from what I've seen of it and also for its popularity. And also Luster, just for its compatibility with Flame and the workflow reasons. I was really excited by a really, really long, in-depth tour of Mystica I got at NAB. But for me, the interest in other platforms, it's pretty anecdotal. We're very deep in the Resolve world, and beyond my curiosity and just beyond my desire to have more platforms under my belt, it just hasn't, Resolve is we're pretty on a single track with Resolve. But I did start in Apple Color, which I don't miss.
Yeah, nobody misses that one.
But it was there when I needed it, and it was the reason that I was able to get tons of hours in of color time from my home in college. So when I started working, I already had tons of hours under my belt. So for that, I'm grateful for Apple Color.
And it was right for the price. It just came right with Final Cut Studio.
Yeah, exactly.
This has been a really interesting conversation. Thank you for making the time and talking with me.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
So if somebody wants to learn more about Mission Film and Design, your shop, where could they go?
Well, you could check out our website. It's MFDSF. That stands for Mission Film Design San Francisco.com. Or you can find me at ayumiashley.com with links to my social media stuff and to my company.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you.